Central Asia is one of the driest regions on Earth. Its vast steppes and deserts are beautiful but harsh, and growing crops here is an uphill battle. Yet, across these arid lands, you'll find massive fields of cotton, one of the most water-thirsty crops in the world. Just one cotton t-shirt takes around 528 gallons of water to produce. Multiply that by millions, and you start to see the scale of the demand. Incredibly, in 2024, Uzbekistan alone produced over 3 million tons of cotton, so much that they refer to it as white gold. On paper, it sounds like a success story. Jobs for tens of thousands of workers, huge exports, thriving textile industries. But peel back the surface, and you'll find that this cotton boom came at an unimaginable cost, one that reshaped the environment of an entire region and destroyed a sea. This is the story of the Aral Sea, once the fourth largest lake in the world, and how it was sacrificed in the name of agriculture. Not long ago, the Aral Sea spanned over 26,000 square miles, stretching across modern-day Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. It was a vast inland sea, fed primarily by two rivers, the Amu Darya and the Syr Darya. Only the Caspian Sea and Lake Superior were larger. While the sea's aquatic life wasn't especially diverse, it supported unique native fish species and over 250 types of invertebrates. These waters formed the heart of the region's fishing industry, providing employment for over 40,000 people in the Uzbek and Kazakh republics of the Soviet Union. To give you some perspective, at its peak, the Aral Sea accounted for nearly 1/6 of all fish caught in the USSR, a nation that stretched across 11 time zones and had no shortage of fishing grounds. But the Aral Sea wasn't just a source of food or jobs. It played a crucial role in regulating the region's microclimate. Large bodies of water have a natural ability to moderate temperatures and maintain humidity. Thanks to the Aral, summers were a little less scorching and winters not quite as brutal. For people living in the surrounding desert regions, the sea made life a little more bearable. Unfortunately, none of that was enough to protect it. In the mid-20th century, the Soviet Union saw potential in Central Asia, not for fishing, but for farming. Vast expanses of flat land seemed ideal for agriculture. There was just one problem. Rainfall was scarce, and the soil was far from fertile. Rather than planting hardy, drought-resistant crops suited to the environment, the USSR chose to grow cotton, a plant that demands staggering amounts of water. On average, producing just 2 pounds of cotton requires anywhere from 2,000 to 5,800 gallons of water, depending on the climate. In a region as dry as Central Asia, growing cotton would require unprecedented irrigation. But the Aral Sea itself couldn't be used directly. It was salty, and always had been. Instead, Soviet planners turned their attention to the rivers that fed it, the Amu Darya and the Syr Darya. And that's where the true disaster began. Darya itself is only about 879 miles long. They had essentially built a second river. Each year, the Karakum Canal channels an estimated 3.4 trillion gallons of water through one of the driest places on Earth, turning desert into farmland. It became the main artery for Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and parts of Kazakhstan to grow cotton on an industrial scale. But this was only the beginning. A web of canals began to sprawl across Central Asia, tapping both the Amu Darya and Syr Darya. By the 1960s, between 5.2 and 16 trillion gallons of water were being siphoned away from the rivers annually, water that once sustained the Aral Sea. And as the irrigation system expanded, the sea began to shrink. Between 1961 and 1970, the Aral Sea's level fell by 8 inches per year. By 1973, satellite images already showed clear signs of the eastern shoreline retreating. Still, few outside the scientific community seemed alarmed. Soviet planners, aware of the trend, floated wild ideas. One included rerouting Siberian rivers, like the Ob River, southward to refill the Aral. But the idea was so massive and so expensive, it was abandoned before it ever left the drawing board. Instead, cotton cultivation continued to grow. More canals were built, more water was diverted. By the 1980s, by 1999, the sea had shrunk to just 11,000 square miles, down from its original 26,000. It had dropped from the fourth largest lake, 2006. The once great sea had fragmented into several smaller, disconnected lakes. By 2020, independent nations like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan continued to prioritize cotton farming, often using the same outdated infrastructure. The irrigation system was incredibly inefficient. The Karakum Canal, for example, was dug directly into sand without proper lining. With scorching heat and high evaporation, 30 to 75% of the water simply disappeared before it ever reached the fields. In Uzbekistan, a 2012 report revealed that only 12% of irrigation canals were waterproof. Just 28% of inter-farm and 21% of on-farm channels had any kind of lining to prevent seepage. This lack of investment meant that even more water was wasted. Modern drip irrigation systems, where water is delivered directly to the roots of each plant, have existed since the mid-20th century and could have saved billions of gallons, but they were rarely used. Instead, the region stuck to outdated, flood-based methods. Canals that branched off into smaller ditches, which dumped water across entire fields with little control. It wasn't just inefficient, it was catastrophic. The disappearance of the Aral Sea brought devastating consequences. And clean drinking water became increasingly scarce. The very climate began to change. Some chosen crops better suited to its climate, or placed long-term sustainability ahead of rapid agricultural expansion. The Aral Sea might still be with us today. Instead, one of the world's largest lakes has nearly disappeared. This is the Great Man-Made River, a colossal engineering feat buried beneath the sands of Libya. Dubbed the world's largest irrigation project, the Libyan government even went as far as calling it the eighth wonder of the world. And to many, that wasn't just propaganda. This bold and ambitious project was the dream of Libya's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi. His vision, to turn Libya's arid desert into fertile land as green as the Libyan flag during his regime, a completely green banner representing the Libyan Jamahiriya. But how close did they come to realizing that dream? How was this river built beneath the desert? And what has become of it today? Let's dive into the story of a river without a drop of surface water, a megaproject born out of desperation, vision, and oil money. Let's begin with the geographic reality of Libya. It's a country located in North Africa, with its entire northern edge lining the Mediterranean Sea. But beyond that narrow coastal strip lies a vast and unforgiving landscape, the Sahara Desert. In fact, about 90% of Libya's land area is desert, and half of it is classified as sand desert, a literal sea of sand dunes and rock. Libya's biggest geographical disadvantage is its lack of freshwater resources. There are no permanent rivers or lakes to speak of. Instead, it has wadis, dry riverbeds that occasionally fill with water after rare rainstorms, only to evaporate quickly. These conditions make Libya one of the driest nations on Earth. Most of the country's rainfall is concentrated in a tiny sliver along the coast, which makes up less than 5% of Libya's total area. Even there, average annual rainfall is just around 4 inches. In the interior, rain is practically non-existent, falling in brief, heavy showers at the end of winter and early spring. That's it. Unsurprisingly, most of the population clusters in cities along the coast, where water is at least somewhat available. According to data from 2020, nearly 80% of Libyans lived in urban areas, roughly 5.4 million people out of a total population of 6.8 million. In rural regions, people survive in small pockets, mainly around oases, using traditional irrigation methods for farming. But water access remains a constant struggle. Water scarcity is a well-known crisis in the Middle East and North Africa. The reasons are many: scorching temperatures, high evaporation rates, limited rainfall, and a growing population. Libya is a textbook example. In fact, the World Resources Institute ranks Libya as the 6th most water-stressed country on the planet. Back in the 1960s, Libya began experimenting with desalination, removing salt from seawater to make it drinkable. But it was an expensive and limited effort. Then, in 1969, everything changed. Muammar Gaddafi seized power in a military coup, and soon, his administration began eyeing a much grander solution, the Great Man-Made River Project. Interestingly, Libya's water woes actually predate Gaddafi. During the 1930s, under Italian colonial rule, water shortages were already a major issue. But back then, Libya lacked the money, manpower, and technology to tackle such a challenge. That all changed in the 1950s, when oil exploration began in earnest. In 1953, while drilling for oil in southern Libya, foreign companies made an unexpected discovery. Not only did they strike large oil reserves, they also tapped into massive underground reservoirs of freshwater. It was like hitting the jackpot twice. Further studies revealed that this water came from the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, one of the largest fossil aquifers in the world. This ancient groundwater is believed to be between 10,000 and 1 million years old, formed back when the Sahara was a much greener, wetter region. Over millennia, this water became trapped deep underground beneath thick layers of sandstone. The aquifer stretches beneath 4 countries: Libya, Chad, Sudan, and Egypt, covering an astonishing 770,000 square miles. It's estimated to contain around 39 quadrillion gallons of water. That's an almost incomprehensible amount. At first, the Libyan government considered using this water for large-scale desert agriculture. But by the early 1980s, the strategy shifted. A new plan emerged: Instead of trying to farm in the desert, why not transport the water to the densely populated coast? It seemed far more feasible than investing in costly desalination plants that the country couldn't afford to operate or maintain. The coastal aquifers, especially around Tripoli, were also becoming increasingly salty and polluted due to overuse. Meanwhile, a giant reservoir of pristine freshwater lay untouched in the desert interior. The only problem? No one lived near it. The water had to be brought hundreds of miles across harsh, empty terrain. Thus, the Great Man-Made River Project was born. Despite its name, it's not a river at all, but an immense network of underground pipes, aqueducts, reservoirs, and pumping stations designed to move water from the heart of the desert to Libya's cities and farmlands along the Mediterranean coast. But building such a river was no small feat. Construction was divided into multiple phases. The idea was to drill deep wells, some over 1,600 feet into the ground, tap into the aquifer, and then transport the water through a massive system of pipes. By the time it's completed, the network is expected to span over 2,500 miles, with a capacity of more than 1.6 billion gallons per day. In 1984, Gaddafi officially launched the project and laid the foundation stone near the Syr Aquifer in eastern Libya. The first phase of the project, known as GMR-1, was focused on two fields, Tazerbo and Syr. Hundreds of deep wells were drilled, and the water was pumped through twin pipelines to Uzbekistan, where it was stored in large reservoirs. From there, it was distributed to the coastal cities of Benghazi and Sirte. By 1991, Phase 1 was complete. It consisted of a 990-mile-long double pipeline capable of transporting 528 million gallons of water per day. To build it, engineers installed a staggering 250,000 sections of reinforced concrete pipe, each 13 feet wide and 23 feet long. These were the largest precast concrete pipes ever made at the time, manufactured at two giant plants inside Libya using steel-reinforced, pre-stressed concrete. The pipes were placed into 23-foot deep trenches using custom-designed cranes and bulldozers. Each joint was sealed with heavy-duty rubber gaskets and cement grout before being buried. The construction also included massive reservoirs. For instance, one reservoir near Ajdabia spans over 3,300 feet in diameter and holds more than 6 billion gallons of water, essentially a man-made lake. The numbers are jaw-dropping. Over 5 million tons of cement were used, enough to build 20 Great Pyramids of Giza. The amount of steel wire used in the pipe reinforcement could encircle the Earth 280 times. Just to appreciate the scale, consider this. Libya even built a monument out of one of these pipe segments to showcase the size of a single piece. Following the success of Phase 1, the second major section, GMR-2, was launched in western Libya. Its goal was to supply water to the capital, Tripoli. Phase 2 began delivering water in 1996, pulling from wells in the Jabal Assa area. Additional phases were planned to connect other regions of the country, with the long-term vision of supplying water for agriculture, domestic use, and eventually industry. Water from the Great Man-Made River was intended to revolutionize farming in Libya. In theory, it would irrigate thousands of acres of land, boost food security, and reduce reliance on imports. And for a time, it seemed to be working. But the project wasn't without criticism. Many scientists warned that fossil water is a non-renewable resource. Once it's used up, it's gone forever. The Nubian aquifer is not actively replenished, especially not in a region where rainfall is so rare. Some also questioned the environmental and geopolitical implications of extracting water shared by multiple countries. Then came the civil war. After Gaddafi's fall in 2011, Libya plunged into political chaos. Maintenance of the Great Man-Made River became difficult. Many of the pumping stations and pipelines were damaged during the conflict. In recent years, armed groups have even used water flow as a bargaining chip, cutting supply to cities like Tripoli for political leverage. What was once a national symbol of pride is now struggling to stay functional. Still, the Great Man-Made River remains a powerful example of human ingenuity, a testament to what's possible even in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Whether it will continue to provide water to future generations, however, depends on Libya's stability, resources, and commitment to managing this fragile legacy. So, did they manage to turn the desert green? For a moment in history, they came close, but the river, like the nation that built it, now stands at a crossroads. For centuries, trade between Asia and Europe was slow and expensive. That all changed with the opening of the Suez Canal, a man-made shortcut that revolutionized global shipping. Today, around 12% of global trade and 30% of the world's container traffic passes through this narrow waterway. Every year, over 1 billion tons of goods, valued between $3 billion to $9 billion a day, travel through the canal. On average, 50 ships pass through it daily. But the Suez Canal, as vital as it is, has its problems. Its narrow width and choke point geography make it highly vulnerable to disruptions. In 2021, the Ever Given, a massive container ship, became lodged sideways in the canal, blocking passage entirely for 6 days. The ripple effects were felt around the world, halting supply chains and costing billions in trade losses. That single incident revealed just how dependent global commerce had become on a single, fragile corridor. More recently, a new and even more dangerous threat has emerged. Houthi rebels in Yemen have begun targeting commercial vessels passing through the Red Sea, which is directly connected to the Suez. These attacks have prompted major shipping lines to reroute their vessels, increasing costs and transit times. With these growing risks, global trade is in desperate need of alternative routes. And that's where Iraq enters the conversation. Nestled at the crossroads of Asia and Europe, Iraq is now positioning itself as a land-based transit hub that could offer a faster, safer, and more resilient path. This country, not exactly known for trade innovation, is now working on a mega project that could shake up global logistics and offer a serious alternative to the Suez Canal. It's called the Development Road, and it could transform Iraq into a crucial link between Asia and Europe. The concept isn't entirely new. Back in 1903, Germany had a similar idea, to connect Berlin and Baghdad by rail, and from there, access the Persian Gulf. It was ambitious, aiming for a 994-mile railway. But by World War I, they were still nearly 600 miles short. The full route was only completed in the late 1930s. Fast forward to today, that old railway is outdated and not built for modern cargo volumes. That's why Iraq launched the Development Road, a high-speed land route stretching from its southern coast to the Turkish border. So no, Iraq isn't digging a second Suez Canal. Instead, the plan is for cargo ships to dock at a new mega port in southern Iraq. From there, goods will be transferred to trains and trucks that race across Iraq, into Turkey, and then on to Europe. Sounds straightforward, but it's not. Iraq's existing rail and road networks are nearly a century old, and decades of war have left them in poor condition. From the 2003 U.S. invasion to the battles with ISIS, the country's infrastructure has taken a beating. So Iraq is building from scratch, a new 745-mile rail and highway corridor designed for speed, efficiency, and heavy freight. The new rail system will allow trains to travel up to 186 miles per hour and stop at 15 new stations, connecting major cities like Basra, Baghdad, and Mosul. The cost? Between $17 billion and $20 billion. And that's just for the inland route. To make this system work, ships need a place to dock, which brings us to the Grand Fa port, the anchor of the entire project. Located on Iraq's 36-mile coastline on the Al Fa Peninsula, the country's only access to the Persian Gulf, Grand Fa is a true mega project. The goal, 100 piers, making it the largest port in the Middle East. For comparison, Dubai's Jebel Ali port, the region's current leader, has just 67. And that's not all. Grand Fa will feature a massive man-made terminal, surrounded by piers, built using cutting-edge techniques to overcome serious environmental and logistical challenges. For example, Iraq lacks the quarry stone typically used to prevent underwater erosion caused by large ships, a process known as scour. Instead of stone, engineers used fabric bags filled with concrete to create underwater mats that require less material and can be installed at any construction stage. This innovation cut the amount of stone needed by 38% and slashed the construction timeline by over 3 years. But one of the biggest challenges was depth. While the average depth of the Persian Gulf is about 115 feet, the waters around the Al Fa Peninsula are much shallower, just 16 to 33 feet deep. That's a problem when you're trying to host ships like the Ever Given, which needs 53 feet of depth just to float. To solve this, Iraq is dredging a 15-mile-long, 1,300-foot wide channel, deep enough to accommodate the world's largest vessels. But the sediment from the Shatt al-Arab River, combined with constant desert sandstorms, means the channel would quickly fill back in. So Iraq built a wall. A massive 9-mile-long breakwater, the longest in the world, was constructed to protect the port. It took 8 years, cost over $1 billion, and required 5 million tons of stone. When Iraq ran out of rock, they turned to core lock units, interlocking concrete blocks that help absorb wave energy. Just these units cost $591 million. In total, half the port's budget was spent on this one structure, but it was necessary to make the project sustainable. Then there's the tunnel. To connect Grand Fa to Iraq's existing Qasr port, Engineers are building a 1.5-mile underwater tunnel, an unusual and bold move for port infrastructure. As of early 2025, the massive tunnel blocks are being placed, and construction is on track for completion. By the end of 2024, the first 5 docks at Grand Fall were already operational. Iraq's prime minister confirmed that the first full phase, including a 38-mile road to Basra, will be complete in 2025. That's just the beginning. Phase 2 includes a steel mill, an oil refinery, and 30 fully functional docks. Phase 3 will bring urban expansion, homes, mosques, shops, and eventually reach the target of 100 docks by 2045. Even with just 5 docks, the port can already handle 3.5 million containers per year. By 2028, it's expected to handle 36 million tons of cargo. By 2038, the goal is 7.5 million containers and 33 million tons of dry bulk annually. It's still far from the Suez Canal's volume, which moved 1.4 billion tons in 2022. But this is a leap forward for Iraq. More importantly, the development road could slash shipping times by up to 15 days between Asia and Europe, a huge advantage in today's fast-paced economy. And unlike the Suez Canal, a land route can't get blocked by a stuck ship. Any disruption can be resolved quickly, without the global ripple effects of a maritime bottleneck. Of course, there are risks. Iraq's geopolitical instability, the presence of armed groups, and tensions with neighboring countries pose real threats to the success of the project. Insurgency or sabotage could target key segments of the route, whether railways, highways, or even the port itself, disrupting operations and scaring off foreign investors. Corruption, mismanagement, and delays in construction could also slow momentum, especially if political leadership changes or public funding dries up. Maintenance of such a massive corridor will require reliable governance, continuous investment, and international trust. All things Iraq is still working to rebuild. Yet despite these obstacles, the development road is more than just infrastructure. It represents a fundamental shift in how Iraq sees itself, not just as a nation recovering from war, but as a potential economic bridge between continents. If successful, the corridor could create up to 250,000 jobs, stimulate local industries, boost logistics and tourism, and anchor Iraq in global trade networks for decades to come. More than the money, this is about Iraq's future, a chance to rewrite its story on the world stage. The Grand Fall Port and Development Road won't change everything overnight, but they mark a bold step toward stability, growth, and national pride.